If those of us in Gen Z don't learn to manage our mindsets, we're going to be in for a rough ride as we increase our foothold in the workforce. So, keeping everything simple, let's dive into that. Welcome back to the Keeping Everything Simple podcast. I'm your host and fellow student, Michael Klukas, and on this show, we boil down complicated topics into simple, actionable tips. So, why am I talking about mindset, Gen Z, and the workforce? Well, distinctly because one of the big things coming up in 2024 is the possibility that Gen Z will overtake baby boomers as the amount of employees that are currently working full time. So, in this article, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see me pulling it up. This is a Glassdoor article titled Glassdoor 2024 Workplace Trends. And this was posted November 15th in 2023. So they were projecting what's going to happen, what's going to come in 2024. They had 8 decent trends. And of them, a lot of them are in regards to return to office orders. There is the extra emphasis on like wages versus benefits. How flexible do companies need to be? What is a sticky wage and layoffs and the long tail end of layoff shadows? But their number one trend, you want to guess what that is with me? I'm going to pull up full screen. Trend number 1, more Zoomers, fewer Boomers. Gen Z will overtake Boomers in the full-time workforce. So despite a softening labor market, Gen Z is poised to overtake baby Boomers in the full-time workforce by early 2024. And this shift has been a long time coming. I'm just reading this kind of word for word at the moment, so that way you guys can kind of see why this is so important. And this shift has been long coming. Gen Z or Zoomers have been seen as quote unquote the kids, and we know this is true. It's been a very annoying point, but we know it's true. Even though the old of us are like 26 now, 27, something like that. But they're increasingly coming of age and making up an important share of the American workforce. Boomers are the largest generation in the full-time workforce from the late 1970s until late 2011. Gen X had a brief period of generational workplace dominance from 2012, 2018, when millennials overtook them, and millennials and Gen X still outnumber Gen Z, and millennials will be the dominant workforce cohort for a good amount of time. So they're going to be there for a decent portion still, and that's perfectly fine because Gen Z is not even overestimated to overtake them until 2040. So we're kind of still sitting pretty, but at the same time, we are coming in and displacing a larger segment of the workforce, and that means a lot of things have to change. The thing is, we also have to be ready for that change. So let's see here. The reason why I wanted to emphasize this article first and foremost is the idea that the coming years will represent a pivotal moment of cultural change as U.S. companies cannot ignore as Gen Z workers who care deeply about community connections, having their voices heard in the workplace, about transparent and responsive leadership, about diversity and inclusion, are rapidly taking up space within the workforce and are increasing our share in our footprint. And that's a good thing, because it's inevitable that things have to change. It's going off this idea that there's been this huge push to return to what worked, quote unquote, previously, or what was the norm previously, as opposed to what are we going to do going forward? What is the new normal going to look like? And that's a big problem, because the other side of this coin is the fact that companies don't actually want to hire Gen Z. Now, this is a broad blanket statement, but according to this article by Business Insider, so some Gen Z seekers are bringing moms or dads to interviews, and it's turning off employers, a new survey finds, which, I'm not going to lie, if that's the case, valid. But we're going to continue. A survey found that some employers favor older workers to avoid hiring recent college graduates. That's kind of the main piece there that I really want to emphasize. And for those of you, again, who are watching or not watching this but listening to this is Business Insider, and that was literally the title of the article, that some Gen Zers are bringing their mom and dad to work or to an interview. But going down into the kind of bullet point highlights of this, so the survey found that employers are favoring the older workers, and the intelligent, so which is the person that did, or the group that did the survey, had 800 managers and directors and executives who are all involved in hiring, and 1 in 5 employers said a college graduate showed up with a parent to a job interview, which again is something that I'm going to touch on in a little bit here, which revolves deeply around mindset. And one of the first things stated is the fact that some employers said they'd be willing to offer older professionals more benefits and higher salaries to avoid hiring new college graduates. And 39% of employers who responded said they prefer to hire older job seekers over college graduates, in part because young professionals don't make a good first impression in job interviews. More than half of the young recruits struggled to make eye contact in an interview. 50% said they asked for unreasonable compensation, and almost half of the employers said a young candidate showed up in inappropriate attire, and nearly 20% of the recent college grads brought a parent to a job interview. Now, there is definitely a lot to unpack there. There's no doubt about that, because if you have a survey size of 800 people, that's not a huge sample set, but if it's a random sample set, then it does work a little bit better. But having this kind of gap in skill, this kind of gap in how we go about this is important to understand, and that's why I said it's kind of valid if you have this impression or something that you believe to be true and it is confirmed in some small way. I wouldn't say bringing a parent to an interview is a small thing, but it's just kind of a difference due to a lack of certain, not understanding, but certain applications that we didn't get a good opportunity to be taught. But the reason I'm diving into that is because that does show that even though Gen Z is going to be taking up a larger portion of the workforce, there is still this kind of gap between what employers want, need, and what we're actively always able to provide on a larger basis. And again, blanket statement here. This is not a one-size-fits-all kind of survey. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of problem. However, if it's something that is relevant enough to be talked about by the larger media and larger scope, it's important that we do address why this occurs. And so the stigma isn't going to change overnight. Millennials had the same narrative for them as well. And now with them making up a majority of the workforce, companies prefer to hire millennials and those who have seniority and years of experience already in the workforce and in the industry that we would hope to get into. And now, with their entering the workforce, it was during the Great Financial Crisis. So 2008, they were getting out of college during a pretty bad time, rounds of layoffs, things just kind of crashing down all around them. For us, it was getting into the workforce at the height of the pandemic, and now here we are in the tailspin of the pandemic with those of us graduating university or high school at this point in time going in and still not feeling 100% confident that we're prepared for work. And that's also a valid standpoint to have, or problem to have, because the thing is, we have the ability and the potential to shake things up and rebuild the foundation of work and find our new kind of normal, our new homeostasis between employers, between employees, companies, groups, teams, whatever you want to look at it. But the thing is, if we don't have the skill sets to make the most of that potential and the most of that change, then we're shooting ourselves in the foot and we're preventing ourselves from actively, truly making the most out of it. And that's why we're starting with mindset and the ability to grow, adapt, and change. So that way, when opportunity strikes, we're able to actively take it. Also, if you're liking the episode so far, make sure that you do subscribe and like this on YouTube. It does help the show grow so much, and I appreciate it. If you listen to us on a podcast app of choice, leave us a rating and a follow so that way the show can be shared with other people just like you. Let's dive right back in. There are 3 kind of main pillars that I want to dive into in regards to how mindset is going to impact your ability to really make your place known at work, as well as how to make the most out of opportunities that are coming your way. And the first one is all about why changing your mindset and perspective is a must if you want to adapt and grow and do your best work possible. And it goes to the fact that I don't mean giving yourself whiplash and the second you have some new information come in, you decide to do a 180 and decide, all right, I'm going to go with a different idea because this one presented something new, but it's instead staying open to different ideas and perspectives, because as we go into the workforce, it is a multi-generational place. We are working with so many different people from so many different backgrounds that it's important that we do open ourselves up to understand that there's going to be differences and there's going to be huge learning opportunities that are going to result from the fact that we're intermingling with so many different people. And that means you have to be able to take on new pieces of information and, again, embrace the fact that there is differences, and that will help you grow and help broaden your horizons about what you can see. So that's the first part there. But then you'll also need to understand the forces at play within any organization and any team. This is the piece that I think is very important, because with the article about Gen Z in the workforce here, and like bringing your parent to a job interview or not making eye contact, and the fact that older team members, older job seekers are currently being offered more benefits, higher salaries, and we're not able to always ask the right questions or ask for the right things, that is a very big problem. Because I've used this example in the past, and I think it is very relevant to say a Gen Zer, such as myself, coming out of university with my bachelor's and a couple, like maybe 1 or 2 basic years of on-school employment, and then maybe like 1 summer job, and no internship that was really dedicated towards real-world experience. I ran my own business for my senior year internship. That was fine, but that's not a whole lot to go off of. I didn't really set myself up to catapult myself into a certain field or a certain area. And that's, I would imagine, probably more average experience. For some people that truly are the go-getters, they will have the internship, they will have the experiences built up beforehand, no matter the generation. But that's a different type of mindset that goes into there. And if we aren't able to have the proper skills, professional etiquette to get into the workforce to begin with, to get our foot in the door, that will pose a big problem for us, because not making eye contact during an interview, asking for way too high of a salary range. Like, I could not go into a job as a bachelor's in management and say, hey, give me $90,000, close to 6-figure salary right out the gate, because I feel I deserve it. While it'd be nice, I'm not going to lie, that'd be nice. That's not how it works. Even now, in my current role, I was able to negotiate, but there is a big thing about asking for too much. Because, yeah, the common understanding is that if you ask for a higher amount, then you're going to have more wiggle room to negotiate. But then we also have to understand that when companies, for a good example, display how much they're able to offer you, if you pick the higher end of that, the people at the higher end usually are there for a variety of reasons and a combination of factors, not just because they came in and asked for it. There is a possibility that, yes, you will get a little bit higher if you're switching companies. That is a fact of the matter. But also, it's all things in balance, because if you're doing it too much, then there's going to be a whole other host of problems. And that all still, I believe, drives from its mindset. Because you have to know and understand how the organization works, how the workplace functions, and how, even though there are pieces that are changing, how we still have to kind of play a role within that to get the most out of it. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just understanding that there is a certain amount of etiquette, understanding, and skills that go into it already. And so you need to learn to then control your thoughts and not have it be the other way around, because it can be overwhelming. It can definitely be scary to think, I have so much that I don't know. There's so much that I need to understand and to do and to be successful. And it gets overwhelming, which is why some people may bring their parents to an interview, because maybe that's their first job interview ever. Maybe they were graduating during the pandemic. Maybe they couldn't work during the pandemic for a variety of reasons. And that's understandable. But also, the other piece that's understandable there is why it's a bit of a turnoff to say, all right, here is your potential new hire, Mr. Johnson, and here is his father, Mr. Johnson Sr., who is here to help him with the interview. It doesn't exactly bode the best first impressions. And first impressions, as we all know, count for so much. And that's just my 2 cents on that front. But it goes, again, back to the idea that your mindset has to be able to grow and adapt. And that means putting yourself in the right spot with the right information to allow yourself to succeed when the opportunities are presented to you. The next piece here is get uncomfortable and learn to go beyond. I'm going to pause there for a second. I don't know. That doesn't get me a copyright, does it? No. If you know, you know, but we're going to move beyond that. We are pushing our limits, and it's to get uncomfortable. That is when the most growth happens. That is when we are able to say, I feel the growth happening. And I don't mean uncomfortable in terms of not feeling safe. Like, I want to emphasize that. I don't mean, oh, this doesn't feel good, this worries me type of thing. Instead, I'm referring to uncomfortable as greater effort put in to achieve even greater results, where I will always use this analogy because it's the easiest one to put in there. Working out, your muscles grow when you are pushing them and you give them a reason to grow, and that feels uncomfortable. That is called training to failure. And it's not that you can't build muscle other ways too, it's just going to take longer periods of time, but explosive growth is training to failure, training properly, and that is where the best growth will happen. That makes sense. The same thing goes with your mindset. You have to be able to get uncomfortable and learn how to navigate certain situations, certain areas where that may not be your strong suit, but it's something that you're going to need to survive, to succeed, and to thrive. And so many achievements in our lives are going to be centered around this idea of how are we able to control our mindset. For myself personally, I still hate conflict. When I started my new job, there was one instance in which I thought I had pissed off an older coworker, and I'm thinking, oh boy, well, I'm uncomfortable now. What'd I do? And I have two options here. I can either ignore it and let myself feel uncomfortable about it. I can dive in and get into it. And I don't mean I'm going to go confront him. I just mean, hey, that may have not been entirely what he meant. I'm not going to assume negative intent here. I'm going to continue about my day, continue about doing my job. And if it comes up, it comes up. But I'm not going to assume negative intent, even if I'm mildly uncomfortable with the idea of conflict. That is what I mean by getting uncomfortable and growing from it. Like, in now myself today, I'm like, all right, cool. I understand my coworkers better. I understand that some of them are just very blunt and they come off very harsh, and that's okay. I'm not going to have to ask them to change that. It's instead me understanding that that means I have to be able to grow and adapt to it. And again, not assume negative intent, because that's a big piece there, but it's all in regards to my mindset. And the third part here then also goes in the fact that this is why so many things in our lives are centered around our mindset. Like, a great example is like athletes and actors who put themselves in the right mindset before a game, before a performance, because they have to be in the right headspace to perform at their best. And this is why mindset just becomes such a key cornerstone in us finding success. Now, the third pillar is about not letting someone else tell your story. And that's important because let me actually share my screen and let's try something here real quick. This is as I recall it happening a lot. So I'm typing out, if you're listening to this, millennials are lazy. That's what I'm typing into Google. Just that exactly. Let's see here. This is an article from 2013, Times Magazine. Millennials are the me generation. They are lazy. Great. And New York Post, 2019, why lazy and tired millennials can't last 90 days at work. Let's see. Oh, this one's actually from 2023, 60 Minutes. Lazy millennials debating work-life balance. 2012, Jason Dorsey, millennials entitled and lazy, ? Axios, people view millennials as lazy and spoiled, 2018. MSNBC News, why are we still complaining about the millennial work ethic? Reddit, millennials are a lazy generation. The Reddit thread burnt out. Inc., some see millennials as lazy and entitled. What's the full article there? Let's see. Yet they may be the most successful generation of our time. Cool. That's a nice little narrative shift there. But you'll see my point there. As I'm saying, letting someone else tell your story is not the key to happiness and success here. And I say this because if that is the narrative around millennials, and now companies are preferring to hire them, they prefer those members in management, leadership roles, in seniority positions. That is a narrative, quote unquote, violation because years ago, a decade ago, it was, oh, wow, we don't want them. They're so lazy. They can't handle the job. They're not prepared for this. And now that narrative is put onto Gen Z. And you know how insane that is to be like, all right, cool. Who's the next victim here? Who is the next group that we can say is unprepared and unlazy? And that is why it's so important that we don't let someone else tell your story, because we are more than capable of thriving at work. However, we still have to avidly be able to explain how we can do that, what we want, and how we're going to make it happen, because we can't just demand things and not have the skills to back it up. I think it's great that millennials' narrative has now shifted to the fact that they are the ones that people are looking for to hire, because that means they have the skill sets, they have the ability, they have the trust built up, and that takes time and that takes effort and energy. And that's something that we have to be able to do as well as the next group coming into the workforce and taking up a larger share of the workforce. And if we can manage our mindset better, in moments of uncertainty, we're able to better explain and understand different situations with clarity, because then we can say, all right, cool. We know there's a lot that we have to work on, but that doesn't mean that we're going to accept the kind of broad blanket statement, because there's good and bad members of every generation. There is higher achievers, there's the middle of the pack, which tends to be a majority of people, and then there is the underachievers, and every generation has them. It's not a new phenomenon. It just depends on how we shift the narrative and how we take control of it with our actions. And so there are three things I kind of want to dive into here in regards to ideas that will kind of make this better for all of us. The first is, as we enter the workforce, especially, and I'm going to get really close to the mic here, if you are a new hire and this is your first or second job and you're still getting your footing, take advantage of company benefits. I cannot stress that enough. They're there for a reason. I'm going to explain. Benefits are things like mental health benefits, education reimbursement, training, certifications. If we want to level up, if we want to do the absolute best that we can do, and again, this doesn't mean that you're an overachiever. It could be as simple as, hey, I don't feel 100% confident in my ability to navigate conflict with good, skills and abilities. In that case, see if there's a course on conflict resolution. See if there's a course on navigating conflict within the workplace. And from there, if you don't feel confident in, say, your ability to show up professionally, because I'm not going to say show up to a corporate job in your sweats, oversized sweater. Some places are fine with that. Cool. Again, this is a broad statement here. We're going to go broad to help the most amount of people, the most amount of Gen Z here. If it's a workplace that is business casual, you're going to wear jeans, you're going to wear slacks, you're going to wear a button up if you're a guy. And if you're a girl, it may be wearing a blouse, it may be wearing jeans, it may be something along those lines, but you can't show up likely in your loungewear. And all things relative, it's just taking advantage of company benefits to help you get up to speed if you feel you're lagging behind a little bit, because you have to be intentional about it. You can't allow someone else to tell you, oh, you just can't do that. It's instead I'm going to figure out how to do this. And that's where you don't want to just fall behind and be okay with that. And that comes into the next piece here, is we want to play offense and not defense. So while I'm encouraging you to use the benefits, don't wait around. Please don't wait until you're like 6 months in the job and still struggling or feeling like you don't know what's going to happen, because at that point in time, you're going to be looking for another job most likely. So you want to make sure that you are playing offense and being the go-getter who wants to make the changes happen. And I would highly encourage you to read books on like communication, intra-communication, so communication with yourself, and interpersonal communication, communication with your team. Books like How to Win Friends and Influence People is such a cornerstone to business communication, because it works and because it's a good book to help you understand how communication can function. And then also emphasize, like, again, if the company offers it, great. But if you can find it online, like courses through like The Improvement Pill, who's a YouTuber that I highly recommend, to have how to communicate, how to make friends, how to resolve conflict, how to grow and be more confident. It's just like little courses like this that might take you like an afternoon to get through, but they're gonna help because they're gonna give you at least some type of guidance and some tools to really learn to play offense and to learn how to not just be a bystander and watch everything else happen to you, but instead make things happen. And the last one here is don't let no's get you down. If we have companies that are hesitating to hire younger workers, don't let that discourage you because, again, that was a sample size of 800 individuals that were answering these questions, and that's not everywhere. That's not every company. But there are good and bad members, again, of every single generation. And you just need to tip the scale in your favor. And the way you do that is by being intentional, and it is by being active. So that way you are actively trying to get better. You are actively learning. You're actively growing. You're actively trying to show why you're a good candidate. And from there, it's learn to go above and beyond, because I know that's something that we kind of all eke back from, or there's been this kind of resurgence in anti-hustle culture. But there is obviously truth to the fact that if you learn to go above and beyond where it matters to you, then that's going to put you on a much better path, because you have to think long term here and not just in the short term. If you're thinking of like, what's my next 6-month job, then get temporary work. That's fine. But if you are truly actively trying to think, what's my long-term career going to look like? And that's important. That's going to allow you to say, all right, I can't just accept whatever comes my way. And that's where the power of, by Cal Newport says, getting so good they can't ignore you. It's doing less. It's doing better, higher quality work. So it's not about quantity. It's not about I can take on so much. It's I'm going to take on less, but I'm going to do it well. I'm going to show my ability to go above and beyond where it counts, where it matters, and where it matters to me. Because if you find that overlap, not only is the company going to want to keep you on, you're going to want to stay on because you are enjoying the process of getting so good that they can't ignore you and your skills. And that's what I emphasize here is also with this idea that Gen Z is unprepared for work, we can't let that be how someone else tells it to us. Because, again, going back to the article by Glassdoor, there is, again, a low amount of employee morale into 2024 from layoffs. There is misery in the middle. Middle managers, companies will feel the squeeze from above and below. There is the return to office orders, which a lot of people hate because they are looking for less rigid workplaces where policies will draw them towards smaller companies. And then there's also just the idea that we want to talk to people in person and have peer-to-peer interactions. There is so much that is changing again that if we allow ourselves to just kind of get swept away into it and be like, all right, cool, we've entered the workforce at a turbulent time, that means there's an opportunity for us to really cement a good foothold. And the best way you can do that is by, again, playing offense. Don't let someone else determine the story for you. Take advantage of company benefits, and don't let no's be the deciding factor in what you do. There's always going to be an opportunity. You just have to prepare yourself for it. So I leave you with this idea that we need to have a mindset that allows us to not only get our foot in the door, but to also absolutely kill it once we do. And to strike that work-life balance and still find ways to invest in our future, because we don't want to make the same mistakes we've seen the older generations before us make. We're next in the wave of workers. We're next in the wave of change. And we have to do our part to make sure that we are ready for it. And I will emphasize that opportunities present themselves to those who prepare. So keeping everything simple, like and subscribe if you watch this on YouTube, and comment what your professional skills are and what you actually most want to learn, because there's so many things that we need to learn. And what do you guys feel would be absolutely amazing to learn in the next phase of your career? If you're watching or at least listening to this on a podcast app, make sure that you leave us a rating and follow. That helps grow the podcast, and I appreciate it so much. Have an amazing day. You amazing people. I will see you all in the next episode. Go out there and do great things.